Okay, this is a story that still raises the hairs on my arms when I think about it. It happened a few years back, when I was fresh out of college, drowning in student debt and staring down an eviction notice. I'd been living on instant ramen so long I was pretty sure my blood type had changed to sodium. That kind of desperation, where you watch your bank account dwindle to nothing, makes you do things you wouldn't normally consider. I was scrolling through job listings at 3 in the morning, the blue glow of my laptop screen illuminating my tiny studio apartment when I saw it. Graveyard shift, cook, server, the Crossroads Diner. Remote location, high pay, housing included. Immediate start. No experience required, just a pulse and a willingness to work odd hours. It felt too good to be true, the kind of offer that sets off alarm bells. But when you're facing homelessness and your fridge contains only despair and a questionable jar of pickles, those alarms sound a lot like a marching band playing a triumphant tune. I applied. The response was almost instantaneous. A curt email. Position is yours. Bus ticket to Junctionville, Texas attached. Someone will meet you. No interview, no references, just a bus ticket into the unknown. Desperation, I've learned, has a way of making red flags look like bright, welcoming banners. The bus ride to Junctionville was 20 hours of purgatory. As we drove deeper into Texas, the world outside the window seemed to peel away. The highway grew narrower, the town sparser, until it felt like we were driving off the edge of civilization into an endless expanse of scrub brush and silence. Junctionville itself was less a town and more a forgotten blur on a map. A rusted water tower, a general store that looked permanently closed, and a single flickering neon sign promising eats in the distance. That was the Crossroads Diner. It was a classic chrome and red vinyl affair, but somehow it felt older, heavier than its mid-century design suggested. Rust bloomed on the chrome. The neon sign buzzed ominously, and the parking lot was empty save for a single battered pickup truck. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and something else. Something metallic and faintly sweet. Behind the counter stood Agnes, the owner. She was a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the very landscape. Gaunt, silver-haired, with eyes that were ancient and sharp, missing nothing. She didn't smile, just fixed me with that unwavering stare. "You're the new night person," she stated, her voice raspy, like gravel rolling over sand. "Good, follow me." She led me to a small, dusty room in the back, barely larger than a closet, with a cot and a single bare bulb. "Your quarters," she said. "We don't get many around here, so you'll be quiet enough." Then she produced a thick, laminated sheet of paper. Its edges were worn smooth. The text faded in places. "These are the rules," Agnes said, her voice dropping, taking on a gravitas that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "You follow them, all of them, no questions, no exceptions." My skepticism flared. I was ready for health codes, maybe a dress code. Not this. But Agnes's gaze was unwavering, and my stomach rumbled in protest. I took the sheet. What I remember of that terrifying list: prep coffee. Always, even if no one orders. No matter how much they tip, never make eye contact with customers who smell of ozone or stale water. If the jukebox plays a song not on the list, do not look at the customer who chose it. Turn your back, wipe the counter, count to 60. Then look. Do not ask patrons about their destination. They are always going where they need to go. After 2 a.m., never serve black coffee to table 7. They prefer it black, but their presence is too strong if you acknowledge it. Offer cream and sugar. If they refuse, leave it on the table. They will drink it or not. If a patron pays with a coin not of this century, accept it without question and place it under the cash register. Do not look at the coin itself. Do not polish it. Do not touch it with bare skin. The radio stays on the local static station. No other channels. The static is a barrier. If the old man in the corner booth speaks, finish your shift without a word. If he stops speaking before closing, it's already too late for you to leave. Never clean the windows facing the highway. Let the dust accumulate. It helps. At precisely 4 a.m., the diner will go silent. Utterly silent. For 5 minutes. Do not move. Do not breathe too loudly. What passes will pass. When the hum returns, it's safe to resume. My first thought was that Agnes was either senile or playing some elaborate prank on the new guy. But as I read it, a cold dread began to seep into my bones. The ink looked old, the paper felt rough, and the specifics, they were too weird to be funny. My first few shifts were a blur of nervous obedience. The diner was quiet. Mostly truckers passing through, a few locals I recognized from the gas station I'd seen. I prepped coffee like my life depended on it. I avoided eye contact with anyone who seemed slightly off. Then it happened. Around midnight, the jukebox, old and clunky, suddenly rumbled to life. Not jailhouse rock or blue suede shoes, but a strange, mournful melody I'd never heard. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly out of place. I looked up instinctively, and there, sitting at the counter, was a man I hadn't noticed before. He was impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed to absorb the light, and his eyes were ancient, like polished obsidian. My breath hitched. Rule 3. Do not look at the customer who chose it. Turn your back, wipe the counter, count to 60, then look. I immediately spun around, my heart hammering. My hands trembled as I wiped the already clean counter, counting frantically in my head. When I reached 60, I turned back. The man was gone. The jukebox was silent. The hair on my arms stood on end. Later that week, a grizzled old man in a worn trench coat settled into table 7. He was pale, his skin translucent. "Black coffee," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. Rule 5. Never serve black coffee to table 7. Offer cream and sugar. My hands shook as I placed the tray, cream and sugar packets beside the mug. He stared at it for a long moment, then slowly, painstakingly, reached out a skeletal hand and pushed the cream and sugar away. He drank it black. I could feel his presence then, a cold, vast emptiness that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. I kept my back turned, scrubbing the grill until my arms ached. The true terror, though, began with the old man in the corner booth, table 3. He sat there every night from 1 a.m. until closing, hunched over, silently nursing a single cup of lukewarm water. He had a newspaper, but he never seemed to read it. He just sat, utterly still. Then, one night, around 2:30 a.m., I heard his voice. It was a low, steady murmur, like a river flowing underground. He wasn't speaking to anyone, just speaking. Rule 8. If the old man in the corner booth speaks, finish your shift without a word. I kept quiet, my movements stiff, trying to appear normal. He continued speaking, his voice an unsettling lullaby of unknown words. But then, at 3:55 a.m., he stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Rule 8 continued. If he stops speaking before closing, it's already too late for you to leave. My blood ran cold. My shift wasn't over for another 5 minutes. The diner was utterly silent now, even before the 4 a.m. protocol. I stared at Agnes behind the counter. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. She was mouthing something, her lips forming 2 silent words that I instinctively understood. Don't look. I didn't. I fumbled for my keys, heart pounding, trying to make my legs move. The old man in the corner booth slowly, creakily stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was agonizingly loud in the oppressive silence. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, then a light, papery touch on my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. I just bolted. Out the back door, into the pickup truck Agnes had loaned me, and I floored it down the gravel road, leaving the Crossroads Diner, the silent old man, and the oppressive silence behind me. I drove until the sun came up, until I hit a real highway, until I saw other cars. I never looked back. I later called Agnes from a payphone. She answered on the first ring. "You left early," she said, her voice flat. "But you kept the rules." "What? What was that old man?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "He was just passing through," Agnes replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "They all are, and sometimes they need a place to rest, and a server who knows when not to look." I quit on the spot. Never went back for my last paycheck, never bothered about the housing. Student debt, unemployment, ramen noodles. They seem like minor inconveniences now, because I know a deeper desperation, the kind that forces you into a place where the rules of man give way to something far older, far colder, and far more terrifying. The Crossroads Diner is still there, I suppose. And I'm sure Agnes is still behind the counter, serving silent patrons, making sure the new night person follows the rules. Every single one. And every night, I still hear the faint, haunting melody of that jukebox song, and I never ever look behind me in the dark. This is a story I rarely tell. Most people wouldn't believe it, and those who might just look at me with pity. But it happened, every chilling detail of it back in 2022. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I was a glaciologist, fresh out of postdoc, brilliant enough to be published, but too focused on my research to network properly. I was always overlooked. That suited me fine, until my little sister got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick that stacks medical bills higher than Everest. We were drowning. My desperation became a physical ache, a constant knot in my stomach. Then the email arrived. An anonymous private entity was funding a highly unusual Antarctic ice core expedition. They needed a lead glaciologist immediately. The pay was astronomical, enough to cover all my sister's treatments and then some. The catch? The previous team had mysteriously vanished a few months prior, and there was no public record of the expedition's true sponsors. Every alarm bell in my head screamed, but the image of my sister hooked up to machines silenced them all. I took the job. The journey to the Antarctic felt like a descent into another world. The last stretch was by ski plane, landing on a vast, featureless expanse of ice that stretched to the horizon, shimmering under a pale, indifferent sun. The research station itself, Outpost Obsidian, was a cluster of prefab modules, stark and utilitarian, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the frozen continent. My team leader was Dr. Elias Vance, a grizzled veteran of countless polar expeditions, his face etched with lines that spoke of more than just frostbite. He had a grim, unblinking intensity in his eyes. On my first day, he handed me a binder, thick with protocols. These weren't just standard safety procedures or scientific methodologies. These were different. "Dr. Thorne," Vance said, his voice flat, "out here, the ice makes its own rules. We just follow them if we want to stay sane and alive." My initial weeks at Obsidian were intense, driven by the sheer volume of work. We drilled, analyzed, and logged. The silence of the ice was profound, broken only by the whine of the drills and the constant thrum of the generator. But beneath that silence, there was something else. A subtle cold that permeated everything, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. It felt ancient, knowing. And sometimes, when I was alone in the core lab, I'd swear the ice itself hummed. A low, resonant frequency that vibrated through the soles of my boots. I saw Vance meticulously follow every strange protocol, his face a mask of grim determination. He'd spend hours just watching the generator, listening. The constant hum, he insisted, was keeping things out. The first real unsettling event happened during a deep core drill. We were nearing the 50,000-year mark, the drill biting deep into layers of ice older than humanity. Suddenly, the bit hit something. The sensors went wild. When we brought up the core, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Encased perfectly within the ice was a large, unidentifiable organic mass. It was iridescent, almost shimmering, and pulsed with a faint internal light. It was clearly biological, but impossibly old. My scientific instinct screamed to examine it, to take samples, to document this impossible discovery. But Vance, his eyes wide and fixed, immediately ordered it sealed in a specialized container. He didn't speak a word, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he locked it away. Then came the whiteout. An impenetrable wall of wind and snow descended, trapping us inside Outpost Obsidian. The world outside ceased to exist. That's when we started hearing the voices. Faint at first, carried on the gale, calling our names. My name. Eris, sweetie, where are you? It sounded exactly like my sister. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. I stumbled towards the outer airlock, my hand reaching for the emergency comms, ready to respond. Vance, his face a mask of terror, grabbed me, his grip like iron. "Don't you dare answer," he hissed. He pushed me back, slammed the inner airlock shut, and initiated full station lockdown. For hours, we huddled, listening to the impossible voices call out to us, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes mimicking the voices of our loved ones. They never came from the speakers. They came from the ice. After the whiteout, the atmosphere in the station changed. The less experienced crew members were visibly shaken, their eyes darting, their faces pale. Their movements became stiff, mechanical. They spent hours staring at the ice walls, as if listening to something only they could hear. They rarely spoke. They didn't seem to sleep. Their eyes held a distant, unsettling stillness. Then the seismic monitors picked up a rhythmic thrumming from deep below the glacier. It wasn't tectonic. It was too regular, too deliberate. Vance, his face etched with grim resignation, immediately ordered all drill bits raised and retracted. "It's waking," he murmured, more to himself than to us. "We've gone too deep." That's when I understood. The protocols weren't about studying the ice. They were about containing something. This glacier wasn't just preserving ancient history. It was a prison. And our drilling, our very presence, had disturbed something vast and impossibly old. The hum of the ice, the voices in the whiteout, the organic mass in the core sample. It was all part of an entity or entities slowly being roused from aeons of slumber. The thought that the previous team had vanished took on a horrifying new meaning. They weren't just gone. They had been absorbed. The last few days at Outpost Obsidian blurred into a waking nightmare. The station's internal temperatures dropped, even with the generator roaring. The ice walls pulsed with a faint internal light. My colleagues, one by one, succumbed. I saw them one morning, standing perfectly still, pressing their hands to the ice, their faces serene, their eyes reflecting the internal glow of the glacier. They weren't shivering. They weren't breathing. They were being emptied, their consciousness drawn into the vast ancient memory of the ice. Vance was the last one with me. He just nodded, his face etched with a terrible peace. "It's reaching for us, Auris," he whispered. "The barrier is failing. It wants to know, to remember." He walked slowly toward the ice wall, his hand outstretched, his gaze fixed on the pulsing light within. I screamed, but no sound came out. I don't know how I escaped. The details are a blur. Maybe I ran. Maybe I was expelled. I remember the howling wind, the biting cold, the impossible rhythmic thrumming underfoot. I recall a desperate struggle with an emergency snowmobile, the engine sputtering to life, and driving blindly into the blizzard, the station's distant lights swallowed by the white. I was found days later, delirious and frostbitten, miles from any established route, barely alive. The official story? a catastrophic equipment failure, and an unfortunate blizzard. The station was found empty, all supplies accounted for, no signs of struggle. Another team presumed lost. But I know what happened. I saw it. I still feel the cold, even in the middle of summer. I can still hear the faint hum of the ice, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear voices calling my name, just at the edge of hearing, urging me to remember, to return. I'm a glaciologist who can no longer bear the sight of ice, because I know that beneath the serene, beautiful surface of the world, there are ancient, hungry things waiting. And sometimes, desperation pushes us into the very places they have been patiently waiting to reach us. This isn't a story I tell often or easily. Most people would call me crazy, or maybe just a recovering addict looking for an excuse. But I swear every word of it is true. My name is Mark, and I used to be a cop. Not a good one, not at the end. I had a gambling problem, a bad one, and it got me into debt with people you don't want to owe money to. I was facing prison, or worse, and my life in the city was crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. I needed to disappear, and I needed cash, fast. That's how I ended up accepting a job as a forest ranger in a national park so vast, so remote, it barely had a name on most maps. It was just Northwoods Park, Sector Gamma. The hiring process was quick, almost too quick. A brief phone call, a background check that seemed suspiciously shallow, and an immediate offer. High pay, isolated post, minimal human interaction. It sounded like salvation, a place where I could hide from my past and maybe, just maybe, earn enough to buy my way out of trouble. The drive there was like driving backward through time. Paved roads gave way to gravel, then to a deeply rutted dirt track. The trees pressed in, taller, denser, darker with every mile. Civilization melted away behind me, replaced by an oppressive silence that wasn't peaceful, but watchful. My ranger station was a lone, weathered cabin, miles from the nearest paved road, miles from anything. The outgoing ranger, a man named Silas, was already there. He was gaunt, his eyes a permanent haunted flicker, and his hands trembled even when he was just holding a coffee mug. He looked like a man who hadn't slept soundly in years. He barely spoke, but his presence was a constant, unsettling tension. He quickly showed me the cabin's rudimentary amenities, the ancient radio, the worn Jeep. Then, he pulled out a thick, dog-eared, leather-bound manual. It wasn't an official Parks Department issue. This was clearly handmade, its pages filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. "This," he said, his voice a low rasp, "is what you really need to know." He flipped to a page, his trembling finger tracing lines of text. What followed wasn't policy or wilderness safety. It was a series of strange, specific rules, each more bizarre than the last. Don't patrol Sector 7 between dusk and dawn. Avoid patches of forest where there's no sound. Barricade everything with iron and bones during the full moon. Don't draw water from the western stream at night. Walk away from whispering pines. Leave raw meat by the old cedar tree every Sunday. It was madness. My first instinct was to laugh, but Silas's eyes held a terrifying conviction. "You break these," he rasped, "and the forest, it takes you. Piece by piece." He finished his explanation, then left without another word, driving away in his own pickup, leaving me utterly alone in the overwhelming silence of the wilderness. My first few weeks were uneventful enough to almost convince me that Silas was indeed just unhinged. I performed my duties, checking trails, reporting on wildlife, looking for illegal logging. The forest was beautiful, oppressive, but beautiful. Yet the silence was always there. Not just the absence of city noise, but a profound, almost intentional quiet in certain areas, like holding your breath. I remembered the Silent Grove rule. I never found such a place, but the idea of it always lingered. Then came the first night I had to patrol near Sector 7. Dusk was settling, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. I was on the ATV checking a remote trail. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, dense. The trees seemed to lean in, their shadows elongating into unnatural shapes. And then I heard it. A low, guttural growl that wasn't bear, wasn't wolf. It vibrated through the ground, through my very bones. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew then that what Silas had written wasn't just a warning, it was a description. I spun the ATV around, flooring it, not daring to look back. I could feel something behind me, moving with impossible speed, something immense, hunting me. I didn't stop until I was back in the cabin, shaking, sweat plastering my uniform to my back, despite the cold. The full moon arrived a few nights later. The air itself seemed to crackle with an unnatural energy. Remembering what I read, I frantically barricaded the cabin. I used old tools, anything metal I could find, jamming them against the doors and windows. I even found a pile of ancient, bleached bones near the stream and used them to reinforce the main window, my hands trembling as I touched them. The night was a symphony of terror. Scrabbling sounds from the roof, heavy thuds against the walls, low, guttural breathing just outside the thin wooden door. I huddled in the corner, clutching the rifle, trying not to breathe too loudly, trying to suppress the desperate animal fear that gnawed at me. Whatever was out there, Silas had warned, it fed on fear. It knew my fear. I lasted until dawn, when the first faint rays of sun pierced the gloom and the sounds outside mercifully receded. My desperation, once focused on money, had shifted. Now it was about survival. The forest wasn't just a job, it was a cage, and I was bait. I tried calling out for help on the radio, but all I got was static. The loneliness was crushing, but also a terrifying shield. One afternoon, I was checking the perimeter near the northern ridge. The wind was picking up, but it was just a normal breeze. Then I heard it. The pines. They were whispering. A soft, sibilant sound, like hundreds of voices murmuring just beyond my hearing. It wasn't the wind through the needles. It was words, just out of reach, unsettling and somehow familiar. I didn't hesitate. I spun on my heel and walked, not ran, back to the cabin, my ears ringing with the phantom whispers, desperate to not hear what they were trying to tell me. My last week there was the worst. I was out of food, the radio was completely dead, and I hadn't seen another human in weeks. The offerings I was leaving every Sunday were disappearing, confirming that something was indeed taking them. One evening, after I'd made the offering, I looked back at the lightning-struck cedar, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of movement in the deepest shadows, something vast and dark receding into the trees. It was real, all of it. I knew I couldn't stay. The forest was slowly, patiently closing in. I packed a small bag, grabbed my rifle, and walked out. I didn't wait for a relief ranger. I didn't wait for permission. I just walked, following the tracks of Silas's pickup, back down that long, winding dirt road, my ears straining for sounds behind me. I walked for 2 days, fueled by adrenaline and terror, until I stumbled out onto a paved road and collapsed. A passing logging truck found me. The official report said I suffered from severe dehydration and paranoia, a common side effect of extreme isolation. They found the ranger station empty just as I left it. No sign of the manual, no sign of the bones. But I know what I saw and what I heard. I never gambled again. I got clean, found a normal job far from any wilderness. But sometimes when the wind howls outside, or when the silence stretches too long, I hear those whispers. I still feel that cold dread, the sensation of being hunted. And I know, deep down, that the forest, that particular part of it, is still out there, its ancient rules unbroken, waiting patiently for the next desperate soul to take the job, to stumble upon its secrets, and to learn what truly hunts in the North Woods.